Part 1. Familiar demon. My unit and I arrived at a small ranch near the town of Leshakala. The people warned us that there, you didn't only have to watch out for organized crime. There was something else, something even more dangerous, something that terrified the townspeople. Gnome Community, thank you for letting us reach your homes, your cars, your headphones, wherever you are listening to us. We are grateful for your preference and, above all, for all those who continue sharing their stories with us. We thank you for your trust. Tonight, there are nostalgic stories that will creep into our homes, and also tales that will take us deep into a forest, that will put us in the shoes of a military squad, facing something they could never have prepared for. Ready? You have a few seconds to regret it and look for another show, because you're already entering the world of Dead Zone. Familiar demon. I grew up like many people. I never saw anything paranormal. I never heard any ghostly sounds, not even the slightest hint of anything supernatural, though everyone else in my house did. I think even Uriel himself has said that he's like that, and that's why he remains skeptical. I had a very peaceful childhood in a house where my mother used to say she saw a man with a farmer's hat, but very sinister, who would look at her from the living room, sitting there every time she got up at dawn to prepare breakfast for my father. According to her, she learned to ignore him. The man would be there only for a moment, then disappear. But the vision was constant. My father and my two older siblings, Gabo and Genesis, said they saw a little boy wearing a light blue suit. He would play tricks on them, hide their things, peek from the doorway when they were alone in a room. They were scared because even though he didn't hurt them, they said the suit looked like the kind you'd bury a child in. Like I said, I didn't see any of that. My childhood was calm and uneventful, until something happened. Something happened 2 days after my 11th birthday. It was a peaceful afternoon. My dad and Gabo weren't home. They were always the loud ones, joking, shouting, and playing around. I liked hearing them, yes, but I also loved the peace of those afternoons when they went to play baseball. We had everything ready for a special dinner. My mom had gone to the store at the corner to get some things we needed. I was just taking off my school uniform and putting on more comfortable clothes. I really liked when we all agreed to cook together, even though I always ended up covered in flour or sauce. I was cheerful and excited. I came out of my room to go downstairs when, Ileana, wait, my sister called me from her room. She sounded worried. I answered from her doorway, feeling like something was wrong. Her light was off and the curtains were closed. Her room was very dark. She was just sitting there on the chair at her desk. Everything okay? What's wrong? I asked. Come here for a second. I swear to you I was about to step inside, but I suddenly felt something I'd never felt before. Distrust. Distrust toward my own sister. I told her to wait, that I was going to get something downstairs. She simply said no, that's all. But even so, I went downstairs confused. And I swear on my mother's life that downstairs, my sister was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Even though I knew it sounded absurd and impossible, I asked her if a second ago she hadn't been upstairs in her room. She looked at me seriously, asked what I had seen, and I told her that I saw her sitting in the dark room calling me to come in. At that moment, she ran upstairs, and I followed her. There was no one there anymore, but my sister went in with determination, slammed the door shut, and screamed with force, "You don't mess with my sister, not with her." Then she began to pray loudly, mixing in curses between different prayers, like she was trying to force something out of that room. I stood frozen at the doorway until she turned to me and said I should go downstairs, not look at anything else, and forget what I had just seen. I don't know if what she did worked, but nothing that terrifying ever happened to me again after that. I never saw any of the entities my family claimed to see. But I was the only one who saw something pretending to be one of us, just once. But I saw it. As time went by, when we were older, one of my mother's friends told us that we had lived in great danger in that house, that the fact something had disguised itself as a child, or had appeared to me as my sister, clearly meant that what was in that house weren't ghosts, but a demon taking different forms, looking for a way to provoke or harm us. Part 2. The Witches of Lechakala. My name is Lieutenant Castillo. I was part of a small military unit assigned to operations in the northern region of the country, near the town of Lechakala. It was a strange place, not because of the people, but because of what surrounded it. The fog would roll down the hills every afternoon, and by night, you could barely see a few meters ahead. The locals told us that people often got lost there, even those who had lived all their lives in the area. Some returned after days walking aimlessly in shock, unable to explain where they had been. Others were never seen again. Of course, none of us believed that. We thought those people just wanted attention, or maybe there were kidnappings going on. That's why we were there, to keep the peace. One night, we received a report of gunfire near an old ranch about 5 kilometers away from town. We geared up immediately and headed out in 2 trucks, one in front, one behind, with me in the lead. The road was narrow, surrounded by forest. The deeper we went, the thicker the fog became, and our headlights barely cut through it. I was already uneasy. My men were quiet too, no jokes, no talking. There was something about that silence that felt unnatural. After driving for almost 20 minutes, the radio crackled. The other truck, the one behind us, had stopped. I asked what was wrong, but only static answered. Then the sound came through, a man's voice, but it wasn't any of ours. It was deep, almost a growl. It said only one thing: turn back. The radio went dead. We stopped, got out, and walked toward the second truck with flashlights. But when we reached it, it was empty. All the doors were open, the engine still running, rifles left behind. There were no signs of struggle, nothing. We spread out to look for them, calling their names. The fog got even denser, so thick that I couldn't see my own boots, and that's when I started to hear it. A whispering sound like a group of people chanting in unison. At first I thought it was the wind, but then, from the distance, I saw shadows moving between the trees. At least 3 of them, long-haired women dressed in what looked like torn rags. One of my men shouted. When I turned, he was gone too. We regrouped quickly, and only 4 of us left now. I ordered them to form a perimeter, weapons ready. The whispers turned into laughter, dry, hollow laughter echoing all around us. Then one of the women appeared, standing just a few meters away. Her face was twisted, her mouth stretched far wider than it should, and her eyes glowed faintly red. She was smiling. I fired first. The others followed. But even after we hit her, she didn't fall. She just disappeared into the fog. And suddenly, from behind us, another scream. One of my soldiers was dragged backward by something we couldn't see. I swear to you, that moment I stopped thinking like a soldier. We all did. We ran back toward the trucks as fast as we could. When we reached them, the second truck was gone, just gone. There were only deep tire marks leading into the forest, as if it had driven itself into the trees. I ordered everyone into the first truck, and we sped off without looking back. But the laughter followed us, through the fog from every direction. And then above us we heard wings. Something flew over the truck, large, heavy. The roof shook as if something had landed on it. The windshield cracked, claws scraping the metal. I yelled at the driver to floor it. We didn't stop until we saw the first lights of town. When we finally got there, all of us were pale, trembling. We told the captain what had happened. He didn't believe us, of course. He sent another unit the next morning to recover the missing truck and men. They found the vehicle, overturned near a ravine. But the soldiers were never found. Only the prints of bare feet surrounded the truck. Hundreds of them, small, dirty like those of women and children. That same night, some locals came to see me at the camp. Old men carrying crosses and candles. They said they wanted to bless the place where we had been. I asked them what they knew. One of them said, "You met them, the witches of La Chacala." He told me that those witches had been there for more than 100 years, women who had been burned alive by landowners for practicing black magic. Since then, they had haunted that forest, feeding on lost travelers, soldiers, and anyone who dared disturb their land. I never went back to that place, and to this day I still hear the laughter, sometimes in the middle of the night when the wind blows hard against the windows. It's faint, distant, but I know that sound. I'll never forget it, the laughter of the witches of La Chacala. Part 3. The Night of the Condemned. They say this happened many years ago, in a small town deep in the mountains, the kind of place that doesn't appear on maps and that no one visits unless they have to. In that town lived a man named Mateo, known by everyone as El Condenado, the Condemned One. He was tall, with hollow eyes and hands that trembled even when he wasn't drinking. No one really knew where he came from. Some said he had escaped from prison. Others whispered that he had once been a priest who had done terrible things. But what everyone agreed on was this: Mateo was not a man you wanted to meet after dark. He lived alone in a shack near the river, surviving on whatever he could steal or hunt. The villagers avoided him. Even the dogs barked whenever he passed by. For years, he stayed in the shadows until one night, everything changed. That evening, the church bells rang at midnight, something that hadn't happened in decades. People woke up confused and ran outside to see what was happening. The bell rope swung wildly, but there was no one in the tower. Then they saw the light. From the direction of Mateo's shack, a strange red glow lit up the trees. Some of the men grabbed torches and went to see. When they reached the cabin, the door was wide open. Inside there were signs of a struggle: broken furniture, blood on the floor, claw marks on the walls. And in the center, Mateo was kneeling, muttering something in a language no one understood. When the men called his name, he turned around and then they saw his face. His eyes were black, completely black, and his mouth twisted into a grin that didn't look human. He whispered something that made everyone freeze. "He's coming for me." Before anyone could ask who he meant, the ground began to shake. A sound rose from the river, like someone screaming underwater. The men dropped their torches and ran back toward the village. Behind them, Mateo screamed too, but his voice was soon drowned out by another deeper sound. Something growling. By the time the sun rose, the red glow had faded. The villagers returned cautiously to see what was left. Mateo's cabin was gone and burned to the ground. And near the riverbank, they found only his footprints, going straight into the water. They didn't come out on the other side. For days, people avoided the river. Then one morning, children playing nearby began to shout. Something was floating in the water. When the men pulled it out, they realized it wasn't a body. It was a wooden cross carved roughly by hand. On it, written in charcoal, were the words, "He took me with him." No one knew what that meant. But from that night on, things in the village changed. Every year, on the same date Mateo disappeared, the river turns dark, black like ink. The air grows heavy, and people swear they hear a man crying out for forgiveness. And those who go too close to the river say they see him, Mateo, standing waist deep in the water. He's coming. He's coming for you next. They call it the Night of the Condemned. And even now, when midnight strikes and the river begins to shimmer, the villagers lock their doors, light candles, and pray until dawn. Because they know that if you hear him call your name, it's already too late. Part 4. The Children of the Well. They say this story happened in a small rural village in northern Mexico, a quiet, peaceful place where everyone knew each other, and nothing ever seemed to change. At the edge of that village stood an old, dried-up well. It had been there long before anyone alive could remember. People said it used to be the main water source, but after a terrible accident decades ago, it was sealed shut with a heavy wooden cover. No one ever went near it anymore, not even the children. Their parents had warned them since they were small, "Stay away from the old well. It's cursed." For years, that warning was enough, until one summer evening. 3 kids vanished. Their names were Emilio, Rafa, and Marisol, all around 10 years old. They'd gone out to play after dinner and never came home. The villagers searched all night, every field, every path, every corner of the forest. But there was no trace of them. Then an old man who lived near the edge of town said something that froze everyone's blood. He swore that right before sunset he'd seen the 3 children near the old well, laughing, throwing stones at the cover. And then he heard one of them scream. The next morning, the search party gathered around the well. The cover was still in place, but something was different. The wood was wet, soaked as if water had seeped up from below. Yet the well had been dry for over 40 years. When they removed the cover, they found nothing. No children, no water, nothing but darkness. The villagers decided to fill it completely with stones and soil, hoping to bury whatever curse it carried. And for a while, things went back to normal until the nights began. At first, it was just sounds, faint echoes that seemed to rise from underground. Whispers, giggles, like children playing. Then came the crying, soft at first, then louder. One woman who lived closest to the well said she woke one night to the sound of a little girl sobbing right outside her window. When she looked out, there was no one there, only small, wet footprints leading toward the old well. A few days later, more villagers began hearing it too, the laughter of children echoing through the streets after midnight. But when they went out to look, the streets were empty. One night, a man named Andres, who had helped fill the well years earlier, decided to prove the stories were nonsense. He went there alone carrying a lantern, determined to show everyone there was nothing to fear. He shouted into the darkness of the well, "If you're really there, come out." The next morning, they found his lantern near the edge, still burning. But Andres was gone, and in the soft mud nearby there were 3 sets of tiny footprints all leading away. After that, no one ever went near the well again. The village priest came and blessed the ground. They built a small shrine and surrounded it with iron fencing. But even that didn't stop the whispers. Every year on the same night the children disappeared, people say they hear them again, playing, laughing, crying. Sometimes villagers wake up to the sound of knocking, 3 gentle taps on their windows. When they look outside, they see nothing, except small muddy footprints on the doorstep. The elders still say the same thing. The well was never empty, and to this day, no one dares to remove the cover, because they all know the truth now. The children didn't fall in. They were taken, and whatever took them is still waiting in the dark. Part 5. The Mirror Room. They say this happened to a girl named Lucia, a quiet, ordinary teenager who lived with her family in an old 2-story house. It wasn't a creepy house, not at first, but there was one room everyone in her family avoided, the guest room. No one slept there anymore. Not since her aunt's accident. Her aunt had been staying in that room a few years before. One night she woke up screaming, so loud that the whole house shook. When Lucia's parents rushed in, they found her aunt sitting on the floor trembling, staring at the big antique mirror that hung across from the bed. She couldn't speak, only whisper the same thing over and over. "It looked at me first." After that, her aunt never went near a mirror again. And soon after, she moved away, far away. Lucia was too young to understand what had happened back then. But she remembered the way her aunt's face looked that night. Pale, terrified, as if she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Years later, curiosity got the better of her. One weekend, when her parents were out of town, Lucia decided to clean the guest room. She opened the curtains, dusted the furniture, and wiped the surface of the large mirror. It was beautifully framed, old and slightly fogged at the corners. When she looked into it, her reflection seemed off. The light in the room was the same, but her reflection looked darker, like the shadows were deeper on that side. She laughed nervously and brushed it off. Until night fell. Around midnight, she was in her bedroom scrolling through her phone when she heard a sound from down the hall. A faint tap. Then another. Like someone knocking on glass, she tried to ignore it, but it kept coming. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, she got up, grabbed her phone flashlight, and walked toward the guest room. The air grew colder with every step. When she opened the door, the mirror was fogged up, like someone had breathed on it from the inside. She took one step closer and saw a handprint appear on the glass from the other side. Her heart started pounding. She whispered, "Who's there?" Her reflection stared back, but then it smiled. Lucia didn't. Her lips were still. The reflections weren't frozen in terror. She watched as her reflection lifted its hand again, perfectly mimicking her movements. Except for one thing, it reached outward, pressing its palm against the glass as if trying to come through. Lucia stumbled backward and ran out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. She locked herself in her bedroom, shaking, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination. But then she heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, the sound was coming from her own mirror. When her parents returned the next morning, they found the guest room door open. The mirror was shattered, but there was no sign of Lucia. Only the faint shape of a handprint remained on one of the broken shards. And when the sunlight hit it just right, they swore it looked like hers, pressed from the inside. To this day, the house stands empty. But people who pass by at night say they sometimes see movement inside the guest room window, a flicker of a girl's face in the reflection. And if you stand outside long enough, You might just see her smile back. Part 6, The Passenger in the Back Seat. They say this story really happened to a taxi driver in northern Mexico. A quiet man named Raul, who worked the night shift to earn enough for his daughter's school. He wasn't superstitious until that night it was raining heavily. The streets were empty. He'd been driving for hours without a single passenger when around 2:45 a.m., he saw her. A young woman stood on the corner near the old cemetery, soaked from the rain. She wore a long white dress, her hair clinging to her face, and she raised her hand slightly to wave him down. Raul slowed the car and rolled down the window. "Where are you going, señorita?" he asked. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Downtown," she said. Raul nodded, unlocked the door, and she got in. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but her face was turned away, staring out the window. He noticed the smell of wet earth and something else. A faint scent of roses. They drove in silence. The only sounds were the wipers brushing away the rain and the hum of the engine. Raul tried to make small talk. "Long night, huh? You're lucky I passed by." But she didn't answer. He looked up again. She was now staring directly at him in the mirror. Her eyes were dark. Too dark. He swallowed hard and looked away. Something about the way she stared made his hand shake slightly on the wheel. After a few minutes, she whispered, "Turn left here." Raul did as she said. But when he turned the corner, the street was empty. No lights, no houses, just fog. He started to feel uneasy. "Are you sure this is the right way?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. Then she leaned forward, her cold breath brushing the back of his neck, and whispered, "Stop here." Raul hit the brakes gently. He turned around to ask for the fare. But the back seat was empty. His heart started pounding. The door hadn't opened. The seat was dry, no sign that anyone had been there. Panicked, he jumped out of the car, looking around in the rain. Nothing. Just silence. Shaking, he drove off fast, praying under his breath. When he reached the main road again, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A small roadside shrine, a wooden cross, flowers, and a photo of the same woman. The inscription read, "In memory of Isabel, who died here, struck by a car on a rainy night." Raul couldn't breathe. He pulled over, stepped out, and stared at the photo under the lightning flashes. It was her. The same white dress, the same dark eyes. From that night on, Raul never drove near that road again. He quit the night shift and started working only in daylight. But sometimes when it rains and the streets glisten under the streetlights, he swears he can still see her reflection, sitting quietly in the back seat of any car that passes by, and those who drive through that same corner after midnight. Say a woman sometimes waves them down, smiling faintly and until they blink, and she's gone. Part 7, The Cry from Room 13. They say this story was told by a hotel employee who still refuses to work night shifts. The hotel wasn't fancy, just a small, quiet place on the edge of town. It mostly hosted travelers, truck drivers, and the occasional tourist passing through. The staff said it was peaceful. Until one night. A new receptionist named Laura had just started her job. It was her first week and she had the night shift alone. Her manager told her the hotel only had 12 rooms, all on the same floor. She memorized each number, 1 to 12. Everything was fine until around 2:30 a.m. That's when the phone at the front desk rang. She picked it up. "Front desk," she said politely. A weak woman's voice replied, trembling, "Please." Someone screaming next door. "Room 13, Laura froze. She looked at the logbook. There was no room 13. She tried to stay calm. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "We only have 12 rooms," the woman began sobbing. No, it's room 13. I can hear someone crying. Please, send help." Before Laura could reply, the call disconnected. Her hands shaking, she picked up her flashlight and checked the hallway cameras. Every room door was closed. Nothing moved. Still, she decided to go check. The corridor was long and silent, the kind that makes every footstep echo. She passed room 10, room 11, room 12. And then, there was a door at the end of the hall. A door that wasn't supposed to exist. It had no number on it, just faded paint and a brass handle. Her heart started pounding. She called out, "Housekeeping. Is anyone there?" No answer, but she heard it, a faint cry. A woman's cry. It sounded like it was coming from behind that door. She slowly reached for the handle and tried to turn it. Locked. She leaned closer. pressing her ear to the wood. And the crying stopped. Then a whisper came from the other side. "Don't open it." Laura screamed and stumbled back. She ran to the front desk trembling, grabbed the hotel phone and called her manager. He arrived 15 minutes later. "There's a door," she stammered. "At the end of the hall, someone's inside." The manager frowned. "There's no door there," he said. She insisted, dragging him to the corridor. But when they reached the end and the wall was sealed, smooth, no door, no handle, Laura's legs went weak. She swore it had been there. She'd touched it. The manager looked at her with concern. "Go home. Get some rest," he said. She quit the next morning. A few days later, the cleaning lady asked the manager why a woman's luggage had been left outside room 13. He thought she was joking, but when he went to see one, there it was, an old leather suitcase, dusty and wet, sitting right against the wall at the end of the hall. He opened it. Inside were women's clothes and a broken room key. The tag read 13. Since then, every few months, guests in room 12 complain about hearing a woman crying next door. The staff always smiles and says, "That's impossible. There is no next door." But every employee who's worked the night shift knows at 2:30 a.m. if you walk down that hallway and listen carefully, you can still hear her crying for help from behind the wall. Part 8. The Mirror That Watched Me. Sleep. They say this story came from a traveler who never stayed in hotels again. It was a long drive. He had been on the road for hours, tired, eyes burning from the headlights. Around midnight, he finally stopped at a small roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon lights and peeling paint. The receptionist handed him a key and said softly, "Room 9, don't move the mirror." He thought she was joking, so he just nodded and went to his room. Inside, it was old but clean. A single bed, yellow lamp, small TV, and a large mirror hanging directly across from the bed. Something about it felt off. It looked too big, too heavy, like it had been there forever. He shrugged it off, showered, and lay down. But as the night grew quiet, he couldn't stop glancing at the mirror. It reflected the whole room, the bed, the window, the lamp. But something wasn't right. When he turned off the lights, the mirror didn't go completely dark. There was still a faint glow, like something dim was shining from behind the glass. He told himself it was his imagination. He rolled over, facing away from it, and slowly drifted to sleep. Then, sometime after 2 a.m., he woke up, not from a noise, but from a feeling. That heavy, cold feeling when someone is watching you. He turned slightly and froze. In the mirror, his reflection wasn't asleep. It was staring right at him, eyes open, still, watching. He sat up instantly and looked behind him. No one. He looked back at the mirror. His reflection was now sleeping again. Exactly like he had been seconds ago. He couldn't breathe. His hands trembled. He picked up his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the mirror. That's when he saw it, tiny fingerprints, on the inside of the glass. Panicking, he grabbed a chair and pulled the mirror off the wall. Behind it was a large hole, unlike a vent or an opening. And inside that hole were stairs, old, wooden, narrow stairs, leading downward. He didn't wait to see where they went. He dropped the mirror, ran out of the room, and drove away barefoot, leaving all his things behind. The next morning, police searched the motel. In the space behind the mirror, they found a hidden passage connecting several rooms. Inside, they discovered food wrappers, old blankets, and a chair facing a small peephole cut directly through the wall. It was aimed right at the bed in room 9. The owner was never found. But the motel is still there, and travelers still say that the mirrors sometimes fog up on their own, as if someone's breathing on the other side. Part 9, the last guest in room 6. They say this story really happened. And if you ever stay alone in a roadside motel, you might think twice before locking the door. It was winter. A cold, wet night somewhere outside the city, the kind where fog covers the roads and headlights vanish after a few meters. A man named Daniel was driving home after visiting his parents. He'd been behind the wheel for 6 hours, and exhaustion started to weigh him down. Around midnight, he decided to stop at a small, cheap motel along the highway. It looked old, cracked sign, half the letters burnt out, but he just needed a few hours of rest. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars. The lights flickered above the reception desk. Inside, an elderly man sat reading a newspaper. He looked up slowly when Daniel entered and said in a raspy voice, "One night?" Daniel nodded. The man handed him a key labeled Room 6. Then he said something strange, in the same low, cold voice. "We don't clean that room much. No one stays long." Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "I won't be long either." He signed the register, took the key, and walked down the dim hallway. The hallway smelled like dust and old wood. The walls were lined with faded photos, people smiling in front of the motel decades ago. He reached Room 6, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room was simple: a single bed, old carpet, small bathroom, and one dusty window facing the empty parking lot. But the air felt heavy, cold, like no one had opened the door in a long time. He tossed his bag on the bed, kicked off his shoes, and sat down. For a while he just stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. It squeaked every few seconds, creak, creak, creak. He reached over to turn off the lamp and lie down. And that's when he noticed something strange. The closet door was slightly open, just a few inches, enough to see darkness inside. At first he thought it was nothing, probably cleaning supplies or a coat hanger. But when he stared at the narrow crack between the door, then he felt it. That feeling of being watched. He stood up slowly and walked to the closet. The air around it felt colder. He could hear his own heartbeat. He placed his hand on the door handle and whispered to himself, "It's nothing. Just my imagination." Then he pulled it open, empty, just an old wooden hanger swinging slightly. He sighed with relief, laughed nervously, and closed it again. Then he locked the door and went to bed. He fell asleep around 1 a.m., but something woke him around 3. It was soft, like the sound of someone breathing. At first he thought it was the wind. But then he realized it was coming from the closet. He sat up, frozen, staring into the darkness. The closet door, the one he had shut, was now open again. Slowly, quietly, and from the darkness inside. A faint whisper, "You shouldn't be here." Daniel jumped out of bed, grabbed his keys, and ran to the door, knocking, but it wouldn't open. The lock jammed. He twisted it hard, shaking, heart pounding. Behind him, the whisper came again, closer this time. "You shouldn't be here." He slammed his shoulder into the door, breaking it open, and sprinted down the hallway barefoot. The old man at the front desk looked up, startled, as Daniel ran toward him, pale and trembling. "What's wrong, son?" the man asked. Daniel stammered. "There's someone in my room. The closet, someone's there." The old man's expression didn't change. He just looked down slowly, then said, "Room 6 has been locked for months." Daniel froze. He turned to point back down the hall, but the hallway was pitch dark. The light bulbs that had been flickering earlier were now completely off. He couldn't breathe. The old man stood up and opened a dusty drawer behind the counter. He took out a photograph, a black and white picture of a man smiling in front of Room 6. His name was Peter, the old man said quietly. "He stayed there 2 years ago. We found him in the closet, hanging." Daniel's mouth went dry. He looked at the photo again and felt his knees go weak. The man in the picture was wearing his exact same jacket. He left without another word. Drove the entire night until morning, never once looking in his rearview mirror. A week later, police checked the motel after Daniel's report. Room 6 was empty, but inside the closet they found something carved deep into the wood. "I told you not to stay." And the old man at the reception? No one could find him either. The motel had been abandoned for years. Part 10. The Silent Passenger. They say this story really happened. And if you've ever driven alone late at night, you'll understand why people still talk about it. It happened to a woman named Sarah. She was 29, a nurse working night shifts at a small hospital on the edge of town. Her routine was always the same. Work, grab a coffee, and drive home around 2 or 3 a.m. That night it was raining hard. The hospital parking lot was almost empty when she got into her car, a small silver sedan. She tossed her bag onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out. The road home was long, surrounded by trees and open fields. No streetlights, no houses, only the sound of rain tapping on the roof and the hum of tires rolling through puddles. She yawned, turned on the radio, and tried to stay awake. It was all quiet, until she noticed something in her mirror. Headlights. Far behind her at first, then slowly getting closer. She didn't think much of it. It was probably just another driver heading home late, like her. But as the minutes passed, the car didn't try to pass her. It just stayed there and close. Too close. Sarah frowned and pressed the gas a little. The car behind her did the same. When she slowed down, so did it. Now her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. She tried to stay calm. Maybe it's just a coincidence, she thought. But the longer she drove, the clearer it became. The car was following her. She could see its headlights clearly now. Bright, almost blinding in her mirror. It stayed right behind her, every turn, every curve, every slow roll at the red light. Finally, she turned off onto a smaller country road, hoping to lose it. The rain got heavier. Thunder rolled in the distance. When she looked again, the car was gone. Sarah exhaled, laughing nervously. "See, just nerves," she whispered to herself. She turned up the heater and kept driving. But the road ahead was darker now, the rain louder, and the silence inside the car felt strange, heavy. She turned the radio off. Only the sound of the rain remained. Then, she heard it, a soft click. It came from behind her. From the back seat, her eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing there, just darkness. She tried to ignore it. Probably the seatbelt buckle shifting, she told herself. She reached for her coffee, but froze halfway. There was a faint sound behind her. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Human. Her hands started to shake. She didn't dare look again, but her instinct screamed at her, "You're not alone." Her pulse raced. She reached for her phone and tried to dial 911. But before she could hit call, a voice whispered, so soft it was almost drowned by the rain, "Keep driving." Her phone fell from her hand. She couldn't breathe. Tears filled her eyes as she stared straight ahead, too afraid to turn around. Her reflection in the mirror caught a shadow, just a faint outline, sitting in the back seat. She hit the gas, driving as fast as she could. She didn't think, didn't blink, didn't even cry out, just drove. After 10 endless minutes, she saw a gas station up ahead. Bright lights, people, safety. She pulled in fast and jumped out, screaming for help. 2 workers ran over as she pointed at her car, sobbing, "There's someone in my back seat." The men looked inside. The car was empty. They searched the seats, the trunk. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a fingerprint. Nothing. Sarah was shaking uncontrollably, barely able to breathe. One of the men offered to drive her home, and she agreed. They left her car there overnight. The next morning, the police came to inspect it. And that's when they found it. On the inside of the rear passenger window, a single muddy handprint, small, like that of a child. But here's the thing. It wasn't on the inside of the glass, it was pressed into the condensation from the outside, as if someone had been sitting there, watching her drive. Weeks later, a similar report came from a nearby town. A young woman driving home alone late at night, who swore she heard someone breathing behind her. Police checked her car. They found the same thing. A small muddy handprint outside the rear window. No one ever found out who, or what, left them. Some say it's the spirit of a child who died years ago in a crash on that same road, still trying to hitch a ride home. Others say it's worse, that sometimes what you hear breathing behind you isn't human. And if you ever drive alone on a dark, empty road, don't look in the rearview mirror. You might not like what you see there.